The night the Boston winter roared stopped scrolling. Imagine this. It's 3 a.m. in the brutal heart of a Boston winter. You're homeless, freezing, with 2 small children asleep on your chest. You send one desperate text for help, but your numb thumb slips. That tiny mistake doesn't send your SOS to your only friend. It sends it to the man who hasn't spoken your name in 6 years. The man whose powerful family forced you out of his life. The father of your twins. You won't believe what happens next. Tap that like button if you've ever felt utterly alone. Please note, per your request, the names, age, and location have been changed to fit an English-speaking Western context. The original length and emotional impact have been maintained and enhanced. Chapter 1. The Misdirected SOS. The Boston winter didn't whisper. It struck. The wind screamed down Triamond Street with a rawness that made skin sting and lungs burn. Snow lay crusted in brittle patches along the curb and caked onto a forgotten metal bench huddled against a brick wall. A woman sat motionless there, her posture curved protectively over 2 sleeping children. Scarlet haze kept her arms tight, not out of fear of losing them, but to hoard the scant heat their 3 bodies shared. The twins' heads rested on her chest, their tiny breaths puffing faint clouds into the frigid air. A bus rumbled past without stopping. A man in a heavy coat glanced her way and kept walking. Her phone vibrated against her palm, the battery icon already crimson. She scrolled to a number she had memorized long before her life unraveled. Phoebe wasn't family, but she was the closest thing Scarlet had left. Pride had a voice, and it whispered to her not to send the message. Hunger and cold were louder. With numb fingers, she typed, "Can we crash with you tonight? Just until tomorrow. The kids are freezing." She hit send, not realizing her insensitive thumb had slipped, altering 1 digit of Phoebe's number, 4 blocks away. In the sterile silence of a glass skyscraper, Elias Thorne stepped out of a conference room and into the near-empty hallway. Midnight meetings were nothing new, but tonight's had been the kind that left tension anchored in his shoulders. The building's heating made the air too warm, too still. His phone vibrated. Expecting another financial update, he looked at the screen. The message stopped him cold. "Can we crash with you tonight? Just until tomorrow. The kids are freezing." A self-generated location tag blinked beneath the text, and above it, the name. Scarlet. The years between that moment and the last time he saw her compressed into a single, visceral jolt. 6 years without a word, a call, or an explanation. Just a void where their future had been. He looked up from the phone, his voice sharp. "To Triamond Street, now." His driver Dita didn't ask why. Chapter 2. The Face-Off. The bench appeared beneath a cone of yellow light, the air around it disturbed by the movement of passing cars. Elias exited before the vehicle fully stopped, his bespoke shoes crunching on the frozen gravel. Scarlet looked up. The wind swept the silence between them. Elias's gaze dropped to the twins, their faces pressed against her coat, then back up to hers. "Are they warm enough?" His tone was steady, but there was no mistaking the edge in it. "We'll manage," she said, tightening the blanket. "You should go." He took another step closer. "Let me help, just for tonight." She opened her mouth to refuse, but the girl in her arms coughed, a thin, dry sound that cut through her resolve. Scarlet's jaw tightened. She nodded once. Slowly, they rode in silence. The blast of the heater turned the frost on their clothes into light moisture. The twins leaned against her, breathing evenly. Elias kept his eyes on the road, his grip on the armrest measured but firm. At the secondary penthouse, he opened the door without speaking. Scarlet stepped in, scanning the space, not for luxury, but for safety. "The guest suite is down the hall," he said. "It's warmer there." Their eyes met for a brief, charged moment. "Thank you," she whispered. "Only for tonight." "Only for tonight," he repeated. Chapter 3. Breakfast and the unspoken truth. Minutes later, room service arrived. Steaming bowls of chicken soup, bread still warm from the oven, mugs of hot chocolate crowned with melting marshmallows. The children's eyes lit up. Scarlett murmured a quiet, "Eat slowly," but her gaze stayed fixed on the window where snow swirled in the amber streetlights. Elias stood by the dining table with his hands in his pockets, pretending to check his phone. But his attention kept drifting, to the way Scarlett smoothed her daughter's hair without thinking, to the small cough her son tried to conceal. When the children finished, Elias gathered the empty bowls. Scarlett stood up, adjusting the blanket on the sofa where the twins were now snuggled together. "You can take the bedroom," Elias said. "It's warmer. I'll stay out here." His tone was final. He paused, searching for something to say that wouldn't push her further away. In the end, he simply nodded. "Good night, Scarlett." She didn't answer, but as he turned to leave, he heard her whisper, almost to herself, "Good night." Audience interaction. If you were Elias, would you push her to explain why she left? Or would you focus only on the children's well-being right now? Comment your choice below. The first morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a pale gold onto the living room. Scarlett stirred on the sofa, a blanket covering her. Her daughter was still asleep, her small hand curled against Scarlett's side. The boy sat cross-legged on the rug, silently leafing through a picture book he must have found on the coffee table. Elias was already in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up to his forearms, pouring coffee into a mug. The smell of toast and scrambled eggs drifted through the air. He watched as Scarlett sat up, her hair falling in loose strands. "There's breakfast," he said simply, setting plates on the counter. She hesitated before joining him, the children following close behind. The boy took a slice of toast, his eyes darting between Elias and his mother. "You don't have to do this," Scarlett said, her voice low but firm. Elias held her gaze. "It's just breakfast." They ate in relative silence, punctuated by the clinking of silverware and the occasional giggle from the twins. Elias found himself watching those moments, the easy rhythm between them, the way Scarlett's eyes softened when she looked at her children, and how quickly they hardened when she caught him looking at her. Chapter 4. The pediatrician's visit. When the dishes were cleared, Elias glanced at his watch. "I have a meeting in 2 hours. I can arrange for a driver to take you wherever you need to go." Scarlett straightened. "We'll be fine. We won't stay past today." A silence hung in the air before Elias nodded. "At least let me get you something for the kids. Warm clothes, groceries, no strings attached." She opened her mouth to refuse, but stopped when her son coughed, a dry, harsh sound. Her eyes flickered with worry. "I'll take him to see a doctor," Elias offered immediately. Scarlett hesitated, then gave a tiny nod. "Just the doctor. That's it." Soon after, they stepped out into the cold again. The city was quieter in the morning, snow crunching under their shoes. Elias walked half a step ahead, holding the glass door of the clinic open for them. Inside, the warmth was almost startling. A nurse ushered them into the pediatric wing. As she took the boy's temperature, she smiled at Elias. "Dad, can you fill out the forms here?" Scarlett's head snapped up. Elias had already taken the clipboard. His pen hovered for a second before he wrote his name in the blank space for parent-guardian. Scarlett watched, her eyes flashing with unease. When the nurse left, Elias handed her the form. But as they led the boy into the examination room, Scarlett's mind had already started to drift, back to the years of separation, to the truth she had buried, and to the man now standing beside her, who had once promised to stay with her forever. Chapter 5. The fight for the truth. The pediatrician, a woman in her 40s with a quiet voice, listened carefully to the boy's breathing through her stethoscope. "It's a mild respiratory infection," she said, making a note on the chart. "We'll put him on medication and keep him hydrated. He should be fine in a few days." Scarlett let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Elias stood next to her, his hands in his coat pockets, his gaze fixed on the quiet boy on the exam table. When the prescriptions were ready, Elias took them without a word and paid at the desk. "I'll drive you to the pharmacy," he said. Scarlett shook her head. "We can walk. It's close." Elias didn't argue, simply fell into step beside her. At the pharmacy, Elias handed the prescriptions to the pharmacist. He returned with a small paper bag, and without looking at her, asked, "Do you have enough for food this week?" Scarlett didn't answer right away. "We'll manage. That wasn't what I asked." His eyes met hers defensively. "We'll be fine, Elias." They walked back in silence. Upon reaching the penthouse, Scarlett started collecting the children's things. "We're leaving this afternoon," she said. Elias's brow furrowed. "Where will you go?" "That's none of your business." "Yes, it is," he countered, his voice low but firm. "Whether you like it or not, it is." Before she could answer, the boy started to cough again. Scarlett knelt down, rubbing his back. Elias knelt too, meeting her eyes. "Stay until he's better, at least." Scarlett hesitated, torn between pride and practicality. Finally, she nodded briefly. 2 days. No more." Elias stood up, a flash of relief in his expression. 2 days. That night, the twins were fast asleep in the guest room. Scarlett sat on the edge of the sofa, watching the snow fall past the glass. Elias returned from his study holding 2 cups of tea. He set one down in front of her. "Scarlett," he began, his tone softer now. 6 years ago. Why didn't you tell me?" Her fingers tightened around the cup. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything, not with your family." Elias leaned in slightly. "You don't know that." She looked at him then, her eyes steady. "I know exactly what they're capable of." For a moment, neither spoke. Outside, the city lights blurred in the snow, and somewhere between them, unspoken truths hung heavy, waiting to be faced, to be call to action. If this story has you hooked, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the dramatic conclusion. Chapter 6. The Aquarium and the Investigation. The next morning, faint sunlight streamed through the high windows. Scarlett came out of the guest room carrying a tray with 2 small bowls of oatmeal for the twins. Elias was already in the kitchen pouring coffee. He looked up. "How does he feel?" "Better," she said, setting the bowls on the table. "No fever overnight." "That's good." He hesitated, then added, "I cleared my morning. I thought I'd take them somewhere warm for a while. The aquarium, maybe." Scarlett's eyebrows slightly furrowed. "We don't need an outing, Elias. They just need rest." "They've been cooped up for days," he said. "A little distraction might help." He paused, searching her expression. "It might help you too. A change of air." She didn't reply, just continued setting spoons next to the bowls. Later, in the car, the city passed in flashes of snow-dusted rooftops and slush-lined streets. The twins pressed their noses to the glass, pointing at buses and holiday lights. Scarlett sat between them in the back seat, her posture guarded. At the aquarium, Elias paid for the tickets without comment. Inside, the soft blue glow of the tanks illuminated their faces. The twins darted ahead to press their palms against the glass, chasing the slow drift of jellyfish. Scarlett stood a step back, watching them, then catching Elias watching her. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, but it wasn't clear if he meant the jellyfish or the children. Midway through the visit, as Scarlett guided the twins toward the touch tank, Elias stepped aside to take a call. His voice dropped. "I need everything you can find on Scarlett Hayes' rental history for the past 6 years, and any legal records." He ended the call quickly, sliding his phone back into his coat before Scarlett turned around. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. The next day, the park lay under a thin dusting of snow. Elias walked slowly, one hand in his coat pocket, the other holding his son's gloved hand. Scarlett matched his pace on the other side, guiding her daughter, who was engrossed in looking for squirrels. They stopped at a playground. The swings swayed gently in the breeze. The twins ran off to climb the slide, their laughter echoing in the still air. Scarlett stood next to Elias, her hands in her pockets. "They don't know," she said quietly. Elias turned. "About me?" She nodded. "I never told them. I didn't want them growing up wondering why their father wasn't there." A muscle tightened along his jaw. "I should have been there." "You couldn't have been," she retorted, her voice low. "They made sure of that." Elias's gaze dropped to the snowy ground. "I'm going to find out exactly who did what." That night, as Scarlett settled the twins to sleep, she found Elias at his desk with a manila folder open. Inside were rental histories, old forwarding addresses, and legal documents, evidence of a deliberate effort to erase Scarlett from his life. At the bottom was a name he recognized too well: Richard Thorne, his uncle, and a board member at his company. Elias's grip tightened on the papers. The next day, Elias invited Scarlett for coffee at a quiet cafe by the harbor. "There's something I need to tell you," he began. "I think I know who forced you out of my life, and I'm not going to let it happen again." Scarlett's hands gripped her mug. "Elias," she started. He cut her off, his voice quiet but unyielding. "I'm not standing by this time. I'm going to deal with him." She studied him for a long moment, then said softly, "And what will happen when the truth gets out? About us. About them." Elias leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "Then the world will know exactly what I'm willing to fight for." Chapter 8. The Showdown. 2 days later, the call came. Scarlett answered the apartment phone while Elias was out. A smooth, controlled voice greeted her. "Scarlett Hayes, we finally speak again." Her grip tightened on the receiver. "What do you want?" "To remind you that your presence in Boston is temporary," Richard said. "Leave before this gets messy. I have resources you can't imagine." Scarlett's heart hammered, but her tone remained level. "I'm not afraid of you," Richard chuckled. "Then you've forgotten how the world works. Ask yourself, can you protect them?" The line went dead. When Elias returned, he found Scarlett standing by the window, the phone still in her hand. "Richard called," she said. Elias's jaw tensed. "Then it's begun, and I'm not letting him win this time." The next morning, Elias stood in the boardroom of Thorne Infrastructure, the city skyline glittering behind him. Richard was already there, leaning casually against the conference table. "You're letting sentimentality cloud your judgment," Richard said before Elias sat down. "This family situation is a liability. Walk away, and the board will forget it." Elias's reply was quiet, almost cold. "They are my children. She is the woman I love. I'm not walking away from anything." A muscle twitched in Richard's jaw. "Then prepare for the consequences." That night, Scarlett found Elias in his study looking at a legal document. She walked closer, reading the header. "Petition for temporary custody." "They're coming for us," she said quietly. "They're coming for me," Elias corrected, his voice firm. "And they're going to regret it." Chapter 9. Controlling the Narrative. The following morning, Elias walked into the kitchen with his phone in his hand, his expression carved in stone. "They're going public," he said without preamble. "Richard has called a press conference for tomorrow. He's going to claim you're unfit, that I'm acting recklessly." Scarlett dropped the knife, her fingers tightening around the counter's edge. "And the twins will be part of his argument," Elias countered, his voice low but firm. "That's why we're going ahead of them." That afternoon, Elias's lawyer, Marissa Grant, joined them in the study. She was direct. "If you want to win, you have to speak first. Control the narrative. Elias, you address the board. Scarlett, you tell the press exactly what happened 6 years ago. Scarlett's shoulders tensed. You want me to tell strangers how I was forced out? How I raised them alone while his family made sure he never knew? Marissa's tone softened. Yes, because if you don't, Richard will twist it until it's unrecognizable. Elias stepped forward, placing a hand over Scarlett's. You won't be up there alone. The next day, the Thorn Infrastructure boardroom was packed. Cameras flashed beyond the glass walls as the members filed in. Richard sat at the far end, his smile polite but sharp. Elias stood at the head of the table. Before we discuss projections or contracts, I need to make something clear. There's been speculation about my personal life. Let me end it now. I have 2 children, and I will protect them and their mother, no matter what the cost to this company or to myself. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Richard's smile faltered. Meanwhile, in the lobby below, Scarlett faced a wall of microphones. The twins were upstairs with a trusted friend. This moment was hers alone. She took a deep breath. 6 years ago, I was in love with Elias Thorn. We planned a life together. That ended when someone in his family made it clear, if I stayed, they would destroy us both. I left, thinking I was protecting him and our unborn children. Gasps rippled through the crowd. I am here now because I won't run away again. My children deserve their father, and we deserve to live without fear. The footage went viral within hours. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Fire. Richard trends across all platforms. Chapter 10. The war is won. The journey begins. That night, Elias and Scarlett sat in the living room, the twins asleep in the next room. Scarlett leaned back on the sofa, exhaustion etched on her face. You were right, she said quietly. We had to say it. Elias moved closer, taking her hand. We aren't finished yet, but now we're fighting on our terms. The next morning, Elias walked into the Thorn Infrastructure headquarters. Richard was already in the boardroom, leaning back in his chair like a man who still believed he was untouchable. You've stirred up quite a storm, Richard said with a smirk. But storms pass. Elias placed a folder on the table and slid it over. Not when the storm brings evidence. Inside were documents, financial irregularities, unauthorized transfers, and deals Richard had pushed through without the board's knowledge. Each page was a nail in the coffin. You think airing dirty laundry will save you? Richard's voice dropped, sharp as glass. I think, Elias replied levelly, the board will care more about a man stealing from them than me protecting my family. By noon, the board voted. Richard was suspended pending an investigation. The decision was unanimous. Meaningful conclusion. A new foundation. That weekend, they took the twins back to Triamond Street. The old bench was still there, dusted with snow. Scarlett sat down, running her hand over the cold metal. This is where everything changed, she murmured. Elias sat beside her, sliding his hand into hers. And where it began again. The twins laughed nearby, their voices stretching over the city's hum. Life's camera seemed to pull back, 4 figures framed against the endless motion of Boston, the past finally loosening its grip. The first days after Richard's removal felt strangely quiet. The board moved on. Headlines began to fade. But within Elias's world, there was a new kind of noise, a domestic hum he hadn't heard in years. One evening, after the children were asleep, Scarlett found Elias in his study, looking at a set of architectural blueprints. You're working late, she said. Elias closed the folder. Not really work. Ideas. He tapped the corner of the paper. A project for affordable, safe, and warm community housing for families who had been exactly where she was that night. Scarlett's eyes softened. You don't have to do this for me. I'm doing it because I can, he countered. And because I should have been there 6 years ago. Weeks later, the 4 of them stood in front of a renovated row house in South Boston. Inside, fresh paint and robust heating awaited the first families to move in. That night, they walked home down Triamond Street. The snow clung to the benches and lampposts, but the cold no longer felt cutting. Scarlett paused at the bench where it all began. "We could have missed all of this," she said quietly. Elias took her hand. "We almost did." And there, their journey, born from one freezing night on a park bench, found its warmest ending. They were looking forward to building a foundation of truth, love, and a future that had no room for the fear of the past. Final call to action. If this powerful story of second chances and justice resonated with you, let me know. Share this with someone who needs a little hope and leave a heart emoji in the comments. Thanks for watching. Tôi chọn hướng số 2, hôn nhân và gia đình, và số 3. Du an không đồng đan sen nha. Phần tiếp theo sẽ tập trung vào việc xây dựng một gia đình đúng nghĩa. Elias và Scarlett công khai đính hôn, Elias nhận con. Đồng thời giới thiệu những thách thức khi khởi động dự án nhà ở xã hội, Housing Project. Chứng minh Elias đã thay đổi thế nào. Tôi sẽ bắt đầu ngay đây, đảm bảo giữ nguyên văn phong và các yếu tố gây sốc CTA như bạn yêu cầu. Chapter 11. The Engagement Announcement. TTA, đừng bỏ lỡ. Nếu bạn tin vào tình yêu và những khởi đầu mới, hãy để lại một bình luận với hashtag #ThornFamily ngay bây giờ. The removal of Richard Thorne was a shockwave that slowly settled into a deep, satisfying calm. For the first time in 6 years, Scarlett Hayes didn't wake up with a knot of dread in her stomach. The twins, Leo and Lily, flourished in the spacious penthouse. Leo's cough had vanished, and Lily's shy curiosity blossomed into fearless exploration. The apartment no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It was becoming a home, filled with the scent of melted butter, children's laughter, and the quiet comfort of Elias Thorne's presence. One chilly Saturday morning, as the four of them were building a ridiculously tall tower of blocks in the living room, Elias looked at Scarlett. Her hair was messy, her hands covered in dust from the carpet, but she had never looked more beautiful to him. "Scarlett," he said, his voice cutting through the cheerful chaos. He dropped to one knee, not a theatrical, grand gesture, but a simple, heartfelt one right there amongst the wooden blocks. Leo immediately mistook the pose. "Daddy, are you playing the knight?" Elias smiled, taking Scarlett's hands. "In a way, yes, son. I am asking your mother to be my queen." He didn't pull out a massive diamond, not yet. Instead, he presented a simple, thin silver band. "I lost you once because I wasn't strong enough. I won't do it again. Marry me, Scarlett. Let's make this official. Let's make us a family." Scarlett's eyes filled instantly, but she squeezed his hands tightly. "Yes, Elias. 1,000 times. Yes." The quiet, private moment lasted exactly 3 seconds before Leo cheered, "Hooray! Mommy is our queen!" And Lily promptly knocked the block tower down in celebration. Chapter 12. A father's legal promise. The engagement was kept private for 1 week. Elias and Scarlett agreed. Before the press got wind of the wedding, they had to address the most crucial legal step. Elias had been secretly working with Marissa Grant, his lawyer, on the most important legal document of his life: the formal acknowledgement and adoption of Leo and Lily. Since they were born during a period of non-contact, a clear legal process was necessary to secure his paternal rights against any future challenge from his extended family. In a quiet, sun-drenched meeting room overlooking the city, Elias signed the final papers. He pushed them toward Scarlett. "These make it real," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "They officially make me their father, not just in my heart, but on every document that matters. I want you to sign them." Scarlett didn't hesitate. She looked down at the paper, seeing her children's names printed next to Elias Thorne. This was the security she'd craved for 6 years. That evening, they sat the twins down. Scarlett spoke first, her voice gentle. "You know how much we love you, right?" Elias pulled the children close. "Leo, Lily, you are my son and my daughter, always and forever. And now, I get to be your official dad. My name goes on all the things, so everyone knows you are Thorns, just like me." The children didn't fully grasp the legal weight, but they understood the love. Leo hugged Elias fiercely. Lily, ever the pragmatist, pointed to the paper. "Does this mean we get more hot chocolate with marshmallows, Dad?" Elias laughed, a full, genuine laugh that Scarlett hadn't heard in 6 years. "It means we get all the hot chocolate you can handle, sweetie." Hook Gay Sock, the city's wealthiest bachelor, just secretly adopted his twin children. But when the news breaks, a powerful figure from Elias's past, a society matriarch thought to be an ally, steps out of the shadows, calling the adoption a stain on the Thorn name. Is Elias ready for the next family war? Stay tuned. The Community Project strikes back. Chapter 13. Groundbreaking challenges. While their personal life was settling into a joyful rhythm, Elias's professional world was hitting turbulence. The Affordable Community Housing Project, inspired by Scarlett and his new mission, was met with unexpected hostility. "It's called the not in my backyard effect, Elias," Marissa Grant explained, tapping a pencil against a zoning map of South Boston. "The land is secured, but the community association, led by a certain Mrs. Blythe, is filing continuous bogus appeals. They claim it will lower property values." Mrs. Blythe wasn't just any local activist. She was Eleanor Thorne's best friend, Elias's highly influential, estranged grandmother, who had been mysteriously silent since the Richard scandal. "She's sending a message," Elias muttered, clenching his jaw. "She thinks this project is beneath the Thorn name. She thinks it's reckless." Scarlett, who had started working as an unofficial advisor on the project, pointed to a section of the blueprint. "The appeals are dragging this out. Winter's coming back. If we don't break ground soon, the families won't be in by next Christmas." Elias looked at Scarlett, recognizing the fire in her eyes. "You're right. We need to go public with this project, not just the scandal. We need to show them who we are building it for." Chapter 14. The Public Debut. Elias scheduled a major press conference, not at his corporate office, but at the site of the proposed housing complex, a muddy, unglamorous plot of land. The announcement was massive. Elias Thorne, CEO of Thorne Infrastructure, and his fiancée, Scarlett Hayes, publicly announced their engagement and launch of the Hayes Thorne Foundation to build safe housing. Elias stood at the podium, but he let Scarlett speak first. "6 years ago, I slept on a park bench in the heart of winter with my children because I had nowhere else to go," Scarlett said, her voice clear and resonant, staring directly into the main camera. "This project is not about charity. It's about justice. It's about giving families a key, not a handout. It's about building a foundation that no wind can tear down." Elias then stepped forward. He put his arm around her, the newly adopted children's pictures flashing on a screen behind him. "My family made a mistake 6 years ago when they turned their back on this woman and my children. Today, I am correcting that mistake. My focus is no longer just on towers that scrape the sky. It is on the foundations that protect the innocent." Audience interaction. What do you think is Elias's biggest challenge now? Dealing with his grandmother, or successfully completing the housing project? Vote in the comments. The public response was overwhelming. But just as the headlines praising the Thorne family's redemption began to circulate, the expected blow landed. Chapter 15. The Matriarch's Fury. That evening, the Thorne family lawyer delivered a handwritten letter on heavy embossed stationery. It was from Eleanor Thorne, Elias's grandmother, a woman whose mere name commanded respect and fear in old Boston society. The message was brief, but its intent was venomous. Elias, your reckless pursuit of this person and the public adoption of children conceived in dishonor is a stain upon our name. Your Hayes Thorne Foundation is an insult to the legacy your grandfather built. Withdraw from this project immediately and end this engagement. If you do not, you will find out that Richard was merely a child playing in the sandbox. I control the shareholders. I control the bank. You may have won the battle for your name, but you will lose the war for your company. Eleanor T. Elias read the letter, his face pale, then crumpled it in his hand. Richard had been a viper, but Eleanor was the entire serpent's nest. She's going to use the company against me, he said to Scarlett, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and fear. She'll call an emergency vote and try to have me removed as CEO. She'll gut the foundation. Scarlett walked over to him, placing her hands on his chest, right over his frantically beating heart. Then we don't run, she whispered, her voice steady. We fought for our truth. Now we fight for our future. She can take the company, but she cannot take the family you built. What is the Thorne legacy worth if it stands on a lie? Elias looked at her, seeing the strength that had kept his children alive for 6 years. He straightened, a grim determination replacing the fear. You're right. We fight. Chapter 16. The calm before the storm. The vow. The threat from Eleanor Thorne was cold and sharp. That night, however, Elias and Scarlett deliberately put everything aside. They needed one night for themselves, free from shareholders, courtrooms, or the ghosts of Richard and Eleanor. After Leo and Lily were soundly asleep, Elias led Scarlett onto the rooftop balcony. Snow was falling gently, creating a glistening white blanket under the city lights. Elias didn't talk about the company. He simply pulled her into his arms, his breath warm against her hair. 6 years, Elias murmured, kissing her temple. I lived 6 years in a glass box up here, with all the wealth, but empty. I thought I'd lost you forever. Scarlett looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the city lights. And I thought your world was too high, that I could never touch it again. Elias gently traced the simple silver band on her finger, the engagement ring without a diamond, yet containing an entire vow. She can take the company. She can blacklist my fund. But you're right, she can't take this. He gently turned her, resting her back against the railing as he faced her. It wasn't the moment of a CEO or a former refugee, but the moment of two people in love. They kissed beneath the Boston night sky, the falling snow a silent witness. This was their vow, needing no legal signature, only the truth. Audience interaction. Which moment in the story makes you believe Elias and Scarlett are meant to be together? Comment below. Chapter 17. The boardroom coup. The final stand. 2 days later, tension crackled through the Thorne infrastructure headquarters. Eleanor Thorne had made good on her threat. She had called an emergency board meeting to vote on removing Elias Thorne as CEO. Elias walked into the room, not in his power suit, but in a dark turtleneck sweater, like a warrior preparing for battle. Scarlett wasn't in the room, but she was downstairs in Marissa Grant's office, monitoring the online feeds. Eleanor sat at the head of the table, a woman with perfectly coiffed gray hair and eyes as sharp as ice. We are not here to discuss family matters, Eleanor began in a voice of steel. We are here to discuss financial fiduciary responsibility. The Hayes Thorne Foundation is a reckless gesture, a costly PR liability, and an insult to the shareholders we are bound to protect. Eleanor then presented figures, highlighting a slight dip in the stock due to Elias's personal chaos. She demanded an immediate vote. Elias stood up. He didn't argue the stock price. He looked directly at each board member, men and women he had grown up knowing. You speak of the Thorne family honor. So do I, Elias said. Our honor is not about building taller towers. It is about taking responsibility. Richard stole 6 years of my life. Eleanor is attempting to steal my children's future. She cannot be allowed to do so in the name of Thorn infrastructure. He pulled out a binder and slapped it on the table. Not financial data, but a statement of concealed transactions between Richard and Eleanor's personal charitable trust. Richard was suspended for fraud, but he did not act alone. Eleanor has used her trust to cover up and manipulate Richard's business decisions. This is evidence of collusion and power abuse. The room erupted. Eleanor furiously slammed her hand on the table. These are lies, Elias. You are grasping at straws. I am merely stating facts, Elias countered. You can vote for Eleanor and keep a legacy built on lies. Or you can vote for me and begin building a new legacy where integrity and responsibility are our greatest assets. Chapter 18. The Unexpected Ally. Phoebe's Return. The vote began. Members turned to each other anxiously. Eleanor looked confident. She had secured enough proxy votes over the years. It came down to a vote from an elderly member, Mr. Harrison, an old friend of Elias's grandfather, who had always remained silent. Eleanor looked at him with a triumphant smirk. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and slowly said, I knew Richard was ruthless, but I never thought the rot spread this deep. I vote for Elias. It was still one vote short. The tension in the room was palpable. Suddenly, the boardroom door opened. All eyes swiveled to the newcomer. It was Phoebe, the friend Scarlett had tried to text that fateful night. Phoebe was not a board member. She was a fierce minority shareholder and an investigative journalist who held a significant stake after her father's passing. Phoebe walked straight to the table, unfazed by Eleanor's gaze. I apologize for being late. I just received these documents. She placed another stack of papers on the table, clearly labeled, Evidence of Thorn Foundation Stock Manipulation. Ms. Thorn has not only damaged this company with shady dealings, she sent a legal team to threaten the contractors and the families waiting for the housing project. We need a CEO who isn't afraid to do the right thing, even when it harms his personal bottom line. I vote for Elias Thorn. Eleanor's phone rang. She looked at the screen. It was breaking news. Phoebe had just dropped the investigative story on the city's largest online newspaper, complete with proof of Richard and Eleanor's manipulation. The vote was concluded. Elias Thorn remained CEO. Eleanor Thorn rose, her eyes red with fury. This is not over, Elias. You will regret humiliating me. She stormed out of the room, leaving behind an atmosphere of relieved yet exhausted triumph. Shock. Hook. Eleanor is defeated, but she left a time bomb. The legal fight with her could drag on for years, draining Elias's wealth. Will their love be enough to survive the financial and emotional exhaustion? Tune in for the final chapter. Chapter 19. The New Legacy. The Foundation. The legal battle against Eleanor Thorn and her allies dragged on for a year. It cost Elias a significant amount of his personal fortune and energy. However, simultaneously, the community housing project flourished due to the intense public support. Elias and Scarlett postponed their wedding. They moved out of the isolating penthouse and into a warm, family-friendly house close to the project site. 1 year later, in the depths of winter, the grand opening of the community housing complex, named Triamond Haven, was held. Snow fell heavily, but the mood was incredibly warm. Elias and Scarlett stood hand in hand. Leo and Lily, now older, ran and played in the courtyard. This is the real legacy, Scarlett said, watching the first families walk into their new homes. Not the towers scraping the sky. Elias nodded. I lost most of my personal wealth fighting Richard and Eleanor, but I gained the most important things: a family and a purpose. Chapter 20. The Warmest Ending. The Vow Sealed. A few weeks later, on a quiet, snowy evening, Elias and Scarlett held a small wedding. No press, no board members, just Phoebe, Marissa Grant, and their 2 children, Leo and Lily. During the vows, Elias looked at Scarlett. "I had lost everything. I once stood by and watched you and our children freeze on a bench. I promise never to let you worry again. Our home is not that penthouse. It is our love." In that moment, Lily, their daughter, took Elias's hand, and Leo took Scarlett's hand, forming a perfect family circle. Together, they looked out the window. Snow still fell on the streets of Boston, but it no longer carried the chill of fear. It was a comforting blanket over a new family, a family built on truth, love, and courage. And that is where their story, the one born on a freezing park bench, found its warmest ending. Not the conclusion of a battle, but the powerful beginning of a new legacy. Meaningful ending. A person's greatest legacy is not the wealth they accumulate, but the hearts they touch. Always choose loi over power.